So could you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get going too far, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for Ginny Igo, who was a long-term town meeting member. She was a leader of a loosely formed group of town meeting members who were successful in raising funds to purchase the first Jaws of Life for the Burlington Fire Department after town meeting defeated the article. So she was an influential person who spent a lot of time here. So a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Okay, first a couple thank yous. One to our state rep, who, as I've mentioned before, has better attendance here than some of our members. So, Mr. Gordon, thank you very much for spending your evening here with us. And we have 4 students here helping out. Doug Edwards, David Koifart, Nolan Woods, and Badrak Hakim. Thank you for your help tonight, folks. And I believe we have a couple of new members who need to be, they've already been sworn in, correct? Well, we at least need to identify them. If you're here, if you could stand up and identify yourself and your precinct.
I'm Samantha Ellis, Precinct 3.
Thank you, Samantha. And welcome. Okay, a couple of usual motions that we have to go through. One, the moderator would accept a motion to allow us to vote by raising our hands instead of by standing. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. I need to appoint a deputy moderator. Mr. Monaco, would you be willing, should I fall dead, to take my place? Do I have a motion to accept Mr. Monaco? All those in favor? Here we go. Opposed? Thank you. And should we not finish our warrant this evening, I need a motion to adjourn to Wednesday, January 28th. 29th. I'll fix my watch, thank you. 29th at 7:30. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, let's get on to the warrant. Article 1, reports of town officers and committees. We have a list here, I'm afraid. This will take a little bit of time. Mr. Sagarino, I believe you have some things to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and very happy to be here tonight. I have a couple updates for a town meeting, and the first thing I would like to update you on, and hopefully you had an opportunity to see the sketches of the new DPW facility that we had displayed out in the hallway. Thank you very much to town meeting for your support of that project. You may have seen a couple weeks ago we had a groundbreaking. It was a cold, dreary December day, but I think it was a good sign of good times ahead. We're very proud to be able to put these two very important departments in a first-class facility to provide services to our residents. And we're very thankful for the other pleasant byproducts of that project. We're going to really be making both of those sites more attractive, more environmentally friendly, and we want to thank you for your support for that. The project has gone out to bid. As you may recall, it's a $32 million project. It was awarded to CTA Construction of Waltham. The phase one of the project, which is the Clark and Reed site, we anticipate to be completed approximately next summer. And then shortly thereafter, we'll consolidate our operations there and begin work on the original DPW site further down Great Meadow Road. So I just wanted to update the body on that information. And my second thing, and I'd like to thank the body for this, is for your support of our position for Economic Development Director. We put together a search committee. Selectman Priest, Selectman Runyon, Sonia Rollins, Rick Parker from the Chamber, Whitney Haskell, Kristen Kasner, John Keeley. I know I'm missing a couple more. Bob Mercier, believe it or not, we got him out of retirement. And of course, Joanne Faust, spearheaded the project. We had some unbelievable applications from some tremendous candidates. I'm happy to say that we were able to hire the number one choice of the search committee, unanimous. That person is Melissa Tentakoulis. She's here tonight. I just wanted to acknowledge her and welcome her to the body. Just a couple of points about Melissa is since 2012, she's been the Economic Development Director for the town of Lexington. Prior to that, she spent time as an Economic Development Planner for the city of Somerville, worked on Assembly Row. You guys may have been there. Her undergraduate degree is from the University of San Francisco in business, and she has a master's degree in planning from the University of Michigan. I urge you all to reach out to her. She's very anxious to start to understand our community and understand the people in our community and the types of things that we want to see in town. So please feel free to reach out to her. And again, thank you very much for your support for that.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. I understand there's a report to be made on OPEB, is that correct? And who's speaking on that? Mr. Curtin?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting. We have put up in the back of the room, I hope everybody got a copy of the updated OPEB valuation as of December 31st, 2018. We have also put up the back a breakdown of all the contributions that the town has made to date, starting back on August 30th, 2013, and through last July 25th of 19, a total of $7,460,294. We also included what we've earned in investment income, that money's invested in the State Retiree Trust Fund, same fund that the major portion of Massachusetts pension systems is in. I also, we've earned $2,529,563. Total fund now stands as of 12/31/19 at $9,989,857. I also gave a breakdown of the performance of that fund attached to the breakdown of the contributions as a performance. And just last year to date, the fund returned 16.61% last year. The total fund 16.57. It has both the 3-, 5-year, and 10-year averages on the return of that fund. As I mentioned, we've only been in the fund probably 6 years, 5 or 6 years, so that return's averaged over 8%. I have the two of the experts here, the people who did the report for us, our new updated valuation. Kathy Riley, who is our actuary, is here with me, and she's going to make a presentation on the report itself. And one of her contemporaries, Steve Manning, is here also with her. And then we'll take any questions that you might have. But at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Riley from the Siegel Consulting Group.
Thank you. So I know you have a copy of the report, and I'm not going to go through the report specifically. I'm going to just spend 2 or 3 minutes talking in very high level about how we complete this valuation, and then have you turn to one page in the report. We did do a PowerPoint presentation, but we got our signals crossed, and we didn't send it electronically over here. So that would probably be available after the meeting if you want to send that out. But we do a valuation of your OPEB benefits every 2 years, and the most recent one was done just about a year ago as of December 31st, 2018. So we look at the experience for the last 2 years, and we basically project what we expect to happen going forward. When we do a valuation like this, it forms the basis of all the numbers that you have to report in your financial statements, all the accounting disclosures, and a recommended contribution. But where I think the report has the most value, especially for a municipality like this, where you're funding your obligations, you're setting aside money in a trust, is to look at how your policy that you've established to fund those benefits, if you do a projection of how those assets will grow and how the liabilities are expected to grow, when do you expect to see the liabilities fully funded? So the town established a funding policy, and with the first contribution on the basis of that funding policy of $500,000 in fiscal 2016. And there was already some money in the trust before that, but that's when you established a funding policy. And the contribution was calculated to increase 9.3% per year. So as you get further out on this funding policy, those increases are going to be more significant. So we'll work with the town to try and manage some of that. But in addition, for the last 5 years, the town has also made additional payments in 4 of those last 5 years. So in the last 5 years, there have been $5.7 million in contributions into the OPEB trust. And as Brian said, at the end of 2019, there are about $10 million in assets in the trust. Now, our valuation was done at the beginning of 19 when there was a little bit less money set aside, and so we already saw a nice little bit of a gain for experience in 2019. But when we're doing a retiree health valuation, we have to project the medical benefits that your current retirees and your future retirees are going to receive, because you don't know exactly who is going to utilize medical benefits in what year and in what amount. We use averages. So we look at your current claims experience, the plans and benefits you offer, the premiums, and we come up with some averages for utilization of those benefits. We take into account that people use more benefits as they age, then Medicare kicks in, and that utilization drops. So the utilization from the town drops, and then it increases again. And we apply trend on top of all of that. And when we do that, we come up with the liabilities of the system, and then the plan, once you know what the liabilities are and you know what your assets are, the plan is to come up with a budget to fund those liabilities. So if you have a copy of the report, if you turn to page 12 of the report, this is what the projection of the assets and the liabilities. We call this a funding schedule. It's a budget to fully fund the liabilities of the town, the retiree health liabilities of the town. What we show you in column 4 are the projected medical benefits that we expect you to pay to your current and future retirees. It's about $4.5 million in fiscal 19, but at the end of the schedule here, about 35 years out, it's up over $20 million. So that's changes in the population, but it's mostly medical inflation that's driving up those numbers. In column 5 here, we show the contributions to the OPEB trust increasing at that 9.3% per year. So in fiscal 2020, it's $713,000 plus an extra supplemental contribution that's already been funded of $500,000. And if you look down that column, you can see we're at contributions of about $7 million at the end of the funding schedule shown here. But if you want to see what sort of progress you're going to make on funding those liabilities, you have to compare column 7 and 8. Column 8 are the projected liabilities of the town. So that's the amount in each year that you would need to have set aside if you wanted your liabilities fully funded. As you can see, you don't close the gap until 2047. So it's a fairly long period of time, but anytime, most times when, whether it's a pension plan or an OPEB plan starts funding an obligation like this, mature obligations, because they've been in place for a while, it's not uncommon to start out with a 25 or 30 or even longer period of time over which to fund those obligations. Think of it like your mortgage. So for the number of years on this funding schedule, the town will continue to pay retiree medical benefits out of your operating budget and then make a contribution into the trust. So in that last year in the schedule here, you'll be at about $20 million in benefits from your operating budget, about $7 million into the trust. It'll be about $27 million. The following year, once you're fully funded, payments come out of the trust and the contribution drops down to the ongoing cost of the plan, which is about $6 million. So certainly significant increases in the short term, a lot of it being driven by the medical costs, not just by the funding costs. And when you're all done, you see a significant savings in cost because now you have all these assets set aside and a lot of investment income to pay for those benefits. So you might say, why fund? You really want to fund because ideally you're setting aside money to fund these benefits while people are working, while they're providing services to the town. We refer to that as generational equity. So the taxpayers who are benefiting from those services are the ones who are funding those benefits. So that's the 5-minute introduction to actuarial science and retiree health benefits. So, want to take questions, or what do we?
We'll take a couple questions. Mike Woods. Mr. Woods, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. 2 questions. One, what's the actuarial assumption for life expectancy? And the rates of return were gross. What's the expense ratio that we're paying for the management of the money?
The net expense is 51 basis points, Mark. Okay.
And for life expectancy, we use a mortality table that takes into account your workforce. We project future mortality improvement on top of that. I'd estimate the life expectancy at age 65 is probably mid-80s, probably 86, 87.
So are we sort of on that benchmark, or how is the experience with respect to retirees? Are they living longer than the typical life expectancy or less?
I think it's pretty much right on the money. That's the assumption. You know, we're also the actuaries for Middlesex County Retirement System. So because you're part of Middlesex County, it's the same mortality assumption, and that's been holding up pretty well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Any additional questions? Ms. Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Betsy Hughes, Precinct 7. You take a look at these numbers, and they're pretty staggering when you keep going on in the amount of money that the town's going to have to contribute. I know a number of other municipalities are dealing with this in terms of looking at the benefit levels that they're providing to retirees and looking for strategies to manage this cost in a proactive way. What is Burlington doing anything on that front?
Yes, we have been working on that. Just recently, a year ago, the Board of Selectmen voted to change the contribution the town makes to future retirees. That we were only paying, the retirees were only paying 20%. Now they're paying 30%. We upped that 10, and that will be reflected in the next valuation report. And Kathy was aware of that, I believe, right, Kathy? So that's one thing we're doing. We're doing a lot with, obviously, with wellness in the town to manage healthcare. I think we have a very good success story in managing our healthcare. We never went to the GIC program. We've been managing it independently. We have over $4.5 million in a trust fund right now. Just ending calendar year 2019, we had a surplus of about $750,000 in our trust fund to add to the trust fund this year. So we've been doing a good job with that, which helps keep, obviously, the liabilities down going forward.
a quick follow-up question. Have you looked at any strategies where, rather than providing the medical benefits and paying for them that way, that reimbursing things like the cost of a Medicare supplemental plan, like a MedExperance kind of program, so that they can be part of a larger pool and take us out of the insurance business?
We do have a MedX program the town does offer. We offer 5 different programs for our senior Medicare retirees presently.
Mr. Maury.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bruce Maury, Precinct 1, Brian, and through the consultants. I do see some, again, just picking it up tonight, I do see some enrollment counts for current in here. Do we have anything, do you have any, or can you share what the enrollment counts for all these numbers through 2047? Is that somewhere in this document?
I'm not sure what you mean by enrollment counts through 2047.
You're calculating dollars here, so there's a liability for X number of people, right?
Yes,
Is it, you're assuming a constant based
Yes.
on current enrollment with no
yes.
change?
Yes, that's
What-
correct.
So we're to
We're-
assume that if it were to grow by 10%, then these numbers would grow by 10% and vice versa.
Yes,
So it's enrollment based, basically.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Looks like we're set on the OPEB.
Thank you, Kathy. Nice job.
I believe we have a
Thanks, Steve.
short presentation by a scholarship group. Are they here? Mr. Boyven?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Bill Boyven, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1, and good evening. I am also the Secretary of the Town of Burlington Scholarship Fund Committee. And after high school, I was privileged to go to some very fine universities completely funded by scholarships. It made a difference in my life. So that's why I'm volunteering as part of this Scholarship Fund Committee, to try to pay back some of that to other people who might have similar opportunities to either go for reduced costs or less debt at the end of their experience. With me tonight is Sheila Fitzpatrick. She's currently the chair of the Town of Burlington Scholarship Fund Committee, and she's going to give a brief summary of what we've accomplished in the last year and what we hope to do this coming year.
Hello. The Town of Burlington Scholarship Fund is a newly formatted scholarship fund that was recently made separate from the Dollars for Scholars scholarship fund that is still in existence. In 2019 was the first year that this version of the scholarship fund existed. This fund is what you see on your tax bill, on your real estate tax or your excise tax. You can check off and donate money. We can accept donations from anywhere. 100% of the money that is collected goes directly to the student scholarships. There is no overhead cost. It's a 100% volunteer committee. There is a town fund, and all money is held and distributed through the town treasurer, so we don't actually receive the money. There are 7 volunteers on this committee. We've each been appointed for a 3-year term. So Gina Leary was last year's chair, and she's this year's vice chair. William Boyven, and he's the secretary last year and this year. Rosalind Manazian, she's in charge of our public relations. Kent Moffett, Jen Kosis, and myself, Sheila Fitzpatrick, and I'm the chair this year. Joe Adebato, the Burlington High School guidance director, is also on the committee, but he just is helping with the logistics and paperwork for us. The committee met numerous times last year between January and May. We created an application, we designed a rating criteria, we reviewed applications, and we made the selections. We worked closely with the Burlington High School Guidance Office during this process. All of the applications that were received through the Burlington High School Guidance Department. And this is open to any Burlington resident, so they don't have to attend Burlington High School. If they go to a parochial school, a private school, a vocational high school, they're able to participate in the scholarship fund. In 2019, we received 57 applications for this scholarship, and the students were from 5 different schools. The candidate names were redacted by the guidance department for us, and each was then ranked with the members of the committee. In 2019, we were able to award 2 $5,000 scholarships. The recipients were Michael Winters and Daniel Downey, and they're both enrolled in college. Michael is a student at UMass Amherst studying engineering. Daniel Downey is a student at UMass Lowell studying mechanical engineering. We received feedback from these students. One of them let us know that he was fortunate enough to be able to use this money to help him live in the honors housing at his college, and he would not have been able to afford that had he not received this scholarship. We are not exactly sure how much money we will have yet this year because we're still waiting for the taxes to be collected. We currently have about $9,000 to award for this year. We've met 3 times so far during the scholarship cycle. We have created a Facebook page. We've revised our application for the 2020 school year. We are currently revising and improvising the rating scale. We are reaching out to other schools. Last year, we reached out to 30 area schools where students who reside in Burlington have been enrolled. We're doing the same this year. It says you can help us by spreading the word about this scholarship. You can contribute to the fund when you get your tax bill or your excise tax bill, and you can take a flyer. We have some flyers on the table in the back to help spread the word about this worthy scholarship for Burlington students. Thank you.
Thank you. Community Preservation Act. Mr. Sachs, please.
Hi, John Sachs, Community Preservation Act Committee. We are a ballot committee that intends to bring a ballot to the May town meeting to ask town meeting members simply to put yes or no vote on the November ballot. And between now and May, we'll be reaching out to town meeting members to explain everything we can through website, emails, and Facebook page about why we think the CPA is good for Burlington. And if you give us the yes vote in May, then we'll be reaching out to the town in general with a general campaign. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Dr. Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Happy New Year. Just wanted to take a minute to thank this body, thank everyone for supporting our operating budget this year. But we're hard at work on fiscal 21, and I just wanted to inform everyone in the back of the room, you have the detailed budget calendar for the school department and the school committee. So the dates of each individual cost center, when those details are going to be discussed with the school committee, are scheduled, and they're in back for your information. So again, thank you very much, and I'll see you all in May. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Conti. I believe the ISAC committee wanted to say something. Mr. Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thanks to Ms. Warfield for helping out at the last moment. The ISAC committee just wanted to basically give a quick update as to where we are and where we're going in the near term. Essentially, the committee was reformed in 2019 after a hiatus of about 5 to 6 years. The primary reason that we were reformed is due to the increased cyber risks that people have been seeing in the press. We have 16 members that are subject matter experts, both from the town administrative departments, schools, emergency management, and other organizations, plus at least 8 members from within the town working on this committee. And currently we're meeting monthly. One of the things that we're primarily looking at is how to protect the town from cyber attacks. Right now, one of the main focuses that we're working on is ransomware attacks, and we want to make sure that we understand what the attack vectors are and how to mitigate the risks. And so we have a set of preliminary recommendations, and they include making sure that we understand where our data is and how to recover. Also, looking at the industry standards of in developing governance models. What I would recommend is that if people are interested in more information about what ISAC is doing, we'll be having a more in-depth discussion over the next couple of months, and you'll see that as an announcement going out through the town clerk's office. But what we're trying to do for the Maytown meeting is to create a permanent ISAC committee through a bylaw change, and we'll be starting work this week towards the roles and responsibilities of what that committee will do. And we hope to have something on the Maytown warrant to address that. And that's a quick update. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Is there anybody I missed? Good. Oh, well, I did miss someone. You're not on my list, sorry. Ms. McDonald,
I'm sorry?
go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to give a quick update on the new transportation system that we're putting in place. Just a quick review. You all voted to not renew the Beeline coming in June 30th, or not voted, but I think it was decided that we weren't going to renew the Beeline as of June 30th this year. And I was asked to write a grant for a new transportation system, which I did. We have received notification that we did receive the grant, which was for $75,000 to go towards the new transportation program, excuse me, which is going to be the LIFT program, along with a company called GoGo Technologies, also known as GoGo Grandparent. Some of you might have heard that, which is the concierge version of Lyft and Uber. So they make the phone calls for people that don't have smartphones or are unable to use their smartphones. So we have been working very hard getting the contracts done, and John Sanchez did the RFP. I've been a little bit hands-off until this point, and now I'm getting excited to get this off and running. So we have decided it's going to be it's going to be a pilot program for people who are 60 years and over, or are disabled, who have a doctor's note telling us they're disabled, or a medical professional, or they are at the 300% of the federal poverty level, which is about $63,000 right now. They don't have to be both, they just have to be one of them. We are going to have, they will have to pay the first $1 of the ride. The town will cover the next $10 of that, and then they have to cover beyond that. Will be for rides that begin or end in Burlington. So if somebody has to go to Boston for a doctor's appointment, that's not a problem. And what else did I want to put in that? We will have trainings once we go live for people who have never used apps before or are uncomfortable using it. Thank you, me too. I don't even have it on my phone yet. So they're actually going to give us a way to play with it so that I can learn how to do it too. And I have to say I'm a little uncomfortable with it, so we'll see what happens. I'm not real good on the smartphone all the time. I'm like my seniors. So current users of the Beeline were given a letter outlining the program and when it's going to happen and what it will be. The applications will be given to me, and I will process those applications and then send those along to Lyft and GoGo. We will be going live with the program on Monday, February 17th. And they have Lyft has promised we will be ready to go then. And just so you all know, Brookline, there have been a couple of towns that are already live doing this same program, but they're small towns. They're not as large as we are. But we did talk to Carlisle about it. But Brookline just went live in September, and we will be talking to them and as we go along and getting advice and hopefully learning as we go. So again, it's a pilot program, so we can kind of tweak it a little bit as we go along, but I am excited about it. It does seem to be the way that the councils on aging and a lot of the municipalities are going with their transportation.
Thank you. Any questions? We'll take a couple quick questions if people have them. Mr. Moran?
Steve Moore in Precinct 4. I just had a question for folks who don't have the smartphones. Is there a way that they can hail rides without using one?
Yes, that'll be GoGo Grandparent. They just have to call them, and they're concierge service for these programs. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they can call, and the call center will order the ride for them. The nice thing about GoGo Grandparent is that if it's a driver that has a bad rating, they'll actually cancel the ride and reorder it. So it's particularly great for seniors.
Great, thanks.
Ms. Phillips?
Thank you. Cindy Phillips, Precinct 2. I just wondered if any of the current riders didn't fit into the 3 categories you mentioned, and if so, what is being done to assist them?
That is going to be part of the tweaking, I think. I know there's some concern about people under 18. So I'm not sure we'll have to cross that when we get to that, if people are not matching those. I think right now the current riders of the Beeline do match those qualifications.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, on to Article 2. Dimensional requirements of the high-rise industrial IH zoning district. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and the article is as written in your warrant. Ms. Kastner and Mr. Buckley, I believe, have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just procedurally, are you going to be looking for the committee votes first before the presentation? And can we take them all together for purposes of the presentation?
I think it will be worthwhile having the presentation first so everyone is kind of on the same page. It makes it easier for the recommendation of the committee to be meaningful, if that's okay.
Mr. Moderator, for the record, Robert Buckley, would it be possible to discuss all of them together and then vote them separately and have the reports presented that way?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be Articles 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here. Thank you. I don't know if any of you heard, as printed in the warrant and as submitted on the warrant deadline for printing, it's the first time that's been the case for a while, so we're proud of that. So thank you for all of you that made that happen. And thank you for helping us get to this point. A year ago, I was here talking about life science and why life science wasn't here in Burlington. We had a few companies, but as you will demonstrate a little bit more later, that we have been kind of a donut hole to a $10 billion industry in Massachusetts. So thank you very much for all of the support you gave us last year on many of our zoning changes. And then because of those zoning changes, in September, we were awarded the platinum status by Massachusetts Biotechnology Council, which puts us on the list, on the top of the list, toward the top of the list, which is fantastic. So this year we said, okay, well, we have the regulations in place. What are the districts that we're looking to attract life science? As you recall, to get the Mass Bio Platinum status, we did have to allow for life science by right in one of the districts. That district is the IH district. Much of what I'm going to go through is in your packet, so I'm going to go through it kind of quick. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. But most of these slides will be familiar. And I also want to thank all of the boards we've been with, Zoning Bylaw Review, Land Use, the Planning Board. We've had fantastic conversations and a lot of help trying to really hone the text of the warrant in the bylaw, so that's been great. And the Board of Health, and Dr. Weiner, staff, and members of the Board of Health were very helpful in helping us understand the relationship between biological agent regulation, their biological agent regulations, and they've also worked very hard to adopt new regulations, new expanded rDNA by biological agent regulations, and there's probably a different title, and I apologize. So we've been very happy with their feedback as well. IH, where did IH come from is, I think, the title of the slide you have in your packet. Back in the late 20s, and really was adopted in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and kind of this tower in a park, urban renewal, clear it all. It's all a mess and there's chaos in cities. And this was the idea. What happened was what you saw a lot in the 50s and 60s and 70s in urban renewal and City Hall Plaza in Boston. Some of you love it, some of you hate it. There's debates among many architects. But really set apart spaces, putting buildings far away from each other and not really creating walkable communities. The public housing people started to like urban renewal to put a lot of people in a little bit of space, and we know how well that worked. And New England Executive Park and 7 New England Executive Park, now 700 District, was built on this model, which was so hip at the time. 155 feet tall, far away from everything else, and we just didn't think that was the model that we wanted to continue in Burlington for the IH district. It was put in place at the original rewrite in 1977 at exactly how you see it today. Large lots, large setbacks. What does that create? Buildings in the middle of lots. What's the land use pattern? Lots of buildings with lots of space between them. So what do we want? We want to create walkable, flexible design to allow for greens, areas for places to play, to congregate, allow for clustered uses so you can park your car once, walk around the areas. And we have achieved that through a lot of the votes of this body from different plan development districts and other zoning changes. So we thank you all for that. But how can we continue to do that? So what we've done, looking at the IH district, in coordination, and you'll see our presentation will be together, we have been working closely with the property owners who are looking to rezone the properties and to decide, or not decide, but to look at where they're located. Are they good for really attracting life science? But what about the IH district? 155 feet tall. We're not building 155 feet tall buildings in Burlington. On average, our buildings are 3 to 4 stories, maybe 5. So we took that to 90 feet. Our IH district is 80 feet for comparison. We did take it to 90 because one of the things we did do was in the IH district, structured parking is allowed. We wanted to incentivize people to build parking under the building, but not have a disincentive because we're lowering the height. So we do allow for the exemption of 2 levels of parking if you're beyond 400 feet of a residential zone and 1 level under building within 400 feet. Let's see. And the other thing we did is to reduce the side the side and rear and front setbacks from the 50 feet that had been there before, to allow for more flexibility in space and design, and to allow for just a better, more pedestrian-friendly, walkable site. What also the incentive to put parking under the building does allow for the potential for additional green space on site. And we did protect the original 100-foot setbacks from all residential districts. So that is the summary of the text amendments. We're going to move in now to kind of the motivations of why we chose the sites, as well as the individual sites themselves.
Thank you, Kristen. Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. This is a culmination of about a year, about a year of discussions with the planning board staff and the planning board as to what is an effective planning tool for the town. Historically, the town of Burlington has been very proactive over the last 35, 40 years in terms of trying to articulate or recognize trends and get ahead of them and preserve its place in development. One of the first projects I was involved in when I came to town was Sun Microsystems, which is on Network Drive. Before I go, let me introduce the representatives of the three projects. Scott Weiss from the Gutierrez, Todd Fremont Smith from Nordblum, and Mara Goldstein from the property ownership group of 6 Vandergraaf. So they're here also. So doing Sun Microsystems back in the 90s changed the character of the town. And it was a collaborative effort between many members of town meeting as well as the town governance to what was the trend, where was the town going, where was the economy going. That led to Oracle, and it led to the Third Avenue, the Nordblum project, which changed the character from industrial to more of a proactive, professional tax base. Now we're facing another dilemma. If you've read the financial press, retail is reinventing itself. Where it goes, we don't know. Office is in a state of flux. I don't think there's been a new office building, pure office building, built in Burlington in the last 10 or 12 years. I mean, it might be for a single user that they had a specific need, but no one's building office anymore. What's the long-term effect of that? The effect is that it will erode your tax base. So working with the planning board staff, Kristen, about a year ago when she proposed the life science changes to the bylaw, she put on a panel discussion that some of the members of this body were present at, and some actually participated. And a number of interesting facts came out of that. What is this industry looking for? When they come to a community, what do they do to the community? What do they want to see? What do they want to contribute? And that led to a number of discussions over the last year. We're working together. We tried to come up with a template that said, look, we don't have any projects in hand right now, but we should tee up some key sites so that they will come to Burlington and diversify your tax base and hopefully lead to some growth in this industry. I had the pleasure of working in the town of Lexington. It was Melissa still here? And did the Shire project. These projects are very expensive. Once they come, they stay, they grow. So, Christine, if we can go to the next. One of the things that came out of one of the panel discussions, which was very interesting, we go back there, the growth in jobs in this industry is 50% versus 18% in traditional office over the last, I think it's from 2007. Growth in wages, almost 70% versus 18%. So there's a tremendous growth in the economics of these projects. We go to the next slide. What was interesting is when we delved into the data working with the planning board staff, if this is Cambridge and Boston, it comes out along the Mass Pike and goes north, and it bypasses Burlington by and large. There are some life science companies here in Burlington, but not to the extent that you see in this corridor. But I will tell you, representing some of the people that look at these sites in other communities, they're trading on the amenities and the lifestyle that you've created here in Burlington. You know, if they go to Billerica or they go to Bedford, even in deference to Representative Gordon, if he's still here, they say if you locate here, you have the advantage of the amenities that Burlington has developed. So we said, well, why are they bypassing us? What can we do to maybe bend this curve? If you go to the next slide, this is the infamous donut that we were referring to. Here is the town line between Bedford and Burlington. There are some life science companies here in Burlington, but as you go north, look at the cluster that's developing north of Burlington. Again, why aren't these locating here? So working with Kristen and the staff and the planning board, the conclusion was there had to be a change in zoning. These companies are looking for rapidity to market. If you go to the next slide. Right now, there's about 1.2 million of space demands out there in the marketplace. 83% of these companies want to be in quickly, within a year or two. They want to be up and running. That's because discoveries move along and they have to rush to market. So we looked at those numbers and we looked at what's out there in this area in terms of demand, and we said we have to change the zoning to at least attract these companies. One of the other things, we're going to go to the next slide. What do they look for? They want visibility. They want that visibility on a major arterial highway because they're in the business of telling you who they are, what they do, and attracting people to work there. So right now, there are 3 sites that are zoned IH in the town of Burlington. The Marriott, the Hilton Garden Inn, and a portion of the Oracle property. So we looked at that and we said, let's identify 3 properties that would fulfill what the market seems to demand for these companies. And where Millipore is, there's room for expansion there. This is 60 Blanchard Road, which is the Datacon site, which is a 1-story building that sits below the highway. And this is the 6 Van de Graaff, which is the, I refer to it as the Samsung Pay building on the crest of the rise there. And this building in particular was attractive because, this building obviously because this is underutilized, but this has a major courtyard in the middle that is roughly half an acre? 3/4 of an acre in the middle of the building that you could easily convert most of that building to another level or 2 and keep the amenities there, but you'd have the highway visibility. And nothing needs to be said about Millipore because it is such a spectacular site. So those 3 sites were identified as the most logical for trying to attract this business to the Burlington area to establish themselves and expand. I want it to be clear, we do not have users at these sites yet because you have to go to market with a site that's ready to go. But since this has been talked about over the last 4 or 5 months publicly, I can tell you that a lot of inquiries have been coming to me saying, is this going to happen? There's interest to move out of Cambridge, out of Kendall Square, cost basis, and to locate in this area. And now you're selling your own amenities. So, if you want to go on. We've worked diligently over the last few months, with the planning board and their staff, and the Board of Selectmen have recommended unanimously, the planning board unanimously, land use unanimously, ZBRC, as to Article 2, which is Kristen's dimensional, but they do not comment on the text amendment, the rezoning. So, we're here tonight. Want to go to the next slide? Oh, not the reserve slide, in case there are questions. We're here tonight to ask your support. It's an opportunity to do what Burlington has done so well over the past, which is to anticipate and get ahead of the curve. And I think the benefit of it is it preserves a lifestyle that has been attractive to many in this room and the constituents here because it protects the tax base. And I do want to recognize the cooperation. I don't know if Dr. Weiner is still here, but the Board of Health, when they heard about this, they had some legitimate concerns. And they spent the last 3 months working on regulations to govern this type of industry, which is critical because what I've found out in my practice, when they come to a community that has very good regulations governing their industry, what they say is, good, they understand what we do and how we do it. We don't have to educate them. So this was a cooperative effort, and hopefully the town will consider it favorably and support this.
I just have one last thing to say in closing. I know we've talked life science, life science, life science, life science, and we've done that because we have a lot of office, we have a lot of big data, we have a lot of software security, we have a growing cluster of additive manufacture and 3D printing. We didn't have a lot of life science. And with what we have here already, with big data and with software security and with everything that is going to become the next industry, and I know ISAC has talked about security as well here, but what is important and where does this go next and where does industry go next, and trying to be on the front end of it is important for us, and that's kind of why we've been on this train for the last 2 years almost. And we're excited to have Melissa Tentakoulis, the Economic Development Director, with us to get on the train as well, to continue moving in this direction, and hopefully you'll see more of us and more of just keeping us current and our office buildings full and our taxes where we want them to be. So thank you.
Thank you. Planning Board. Recommendations of the Planning Board?
The planning board voted unanimously in favor.
Of all of them, or?
600, yes.
I mean, for all articles or just for this one? We got
All of
articles
We
2,
voted
3, and
all of them.
for all of them. Okay. Land Use Committee, have recommendations? Thank you.
Land Use Committee voted, Marty Pearson, Precinct 3. Land Use Committee voted 3-0 with one person leaving the meeting early to approve of the changes in the IH zoning chart, and 6-0 for each of the 3 zoning applications.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. We reviewed with planning, and we voted 8-0 in favor of Article 2, which is the text amendment. Thank you.
Discussion. Questions from the body? Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. I hope I have the right text here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've noticed that there's a section in here about additional regulations for biotechnology, and it's stricken as far as the planning board may grant special permit. Is that, I'm assuming that is part of this particular article.
It is.
I'd just like a question, if I may, through the moderator. Is the Board of Health, I would like to hear from someone with the Board of Health if they're okay with this section being stricken. I'm just a little bit concerned as far as who would have that type of knowledge and background to be able to, you know, put their approval on some of these companies that do come in here.
Ms. Kastner, are you able to handle that, or should we?
I will begin, and then if anyone from the Board of Health wants to as they make their way down here. So if you recall back in 2010 or 2012, I think it was 12, we did put in some regulations for biotechnology, trying to do what we've done in the last year or so, but you know, it was somewhat successful, but not as successful as this last effort. And one of the things we did at the time was put in a section that gave the Board of Health additional authorities, which, as meeting with town council, with staff, town council, and Dr. Weiner was on the phone, we had a very good conversation about kind of the structure. We originally took Section 10.5 and modified it a little bit to allow for the Board of Health, but at the same time, the Board of Health was looking to create their own regulations. So I will let Dr. Weiner weigh in on that, and if you have questions in terms of the mechanism of having it in or not, town council might be able to help with that.
I'll make a long story short. We have our own regulation now as of last week, the biological safety regulation in town, which takes this community into the 21st century, where any biological company that comes to Burlington has to come to the Board of Health. There was a loophole that the board caught when this was first proposed, and many of you called me, many of you probably read that I was very upset about it, but we closed the loophole with the help of the planning board and their council and everybody involved, and we passed it at our last meeting. It was advertised in the newspaper last week, and it is now in force. So to that end, we have it covered now. This community has it covered.
Follow-up, if I may, Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Cormier, go ahead.
Just a point of clarification, if you will. So process-wise, when a development comes here in town and approaches the planning board, they get redirected to you directly as a first starting point before it moves on?
Our Director of Public Health, Susan Luminello, she's worked so hard on this with me. I'm going to let her answer this.
Yes, thank you. So when a development comes into town, through these regulations, they would be allowed by right, so they wouldn't need to get a special permit through the planning board. But they would need to go to the building department. So we talked to the building department, and any of these companies coming through will get flagged at the building department, and then the building department would notify the Board of Health.
Okay, thank you. If I may, Mr. Moderator? I just
Go
had
ahead.
a couple of other questions, if I could. As kind of a site, and it doesn't, it has to do more with some of the technical requirements on this. I know that the reduction in the height, could you give us an example as to what the 90 feet would look like for most people? I think visually, if there's an existing structure that people could look at and say, okay, now I have a better idea as to what I'm voting on, height restriction.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Now I'm going to caveat this. This is an example. I want that to be clear. This is an example. This is something that I don't want it to be that we represent. This is what we're going to build. But we anticipated that question, so if we could find that reserve slide. This would be an example. There is the Oracle building. This would be at 60 Blanchard with parking underneath.
Okay, thank you. And one last, if I could. I noticed that you reduced the setbacks. Could you give me a justification on them? I'm always very concerned when you start to reduce that area in which they can actually kind of, abut against, existing parcels or otherwise. And I'd like an explanation as to why they decided to reduce it. 25 feet is not, that's not an awful lot of space. And some of the others are reduced as well. And I'm just a little bit kind of on the fence as far as whether I really like the, reducing those type of requirements on buildings now.
Ms. Gassner.
Thank you. So I did go through some of the development pattern. The IG zone is actually less than what we proposed for this right now. So we went back and forth. Should it be the IG zone? Should we map it to make it more? Because one of the things we wanted to make sure we did in IH, there aren't a lot of properties zoned IH. If there are more, we want to match the character of the development that is going to have the character of the development that's already in Burlington. If you take Burlington Woods, if you take the Burlington Mall Road corridor. And so therefore we looked at IG. We said, why don't we just match IG? But also looking at it, we said, well, we don't want to make it exactly the same. We kept the 100 feet from residential. Included within IH and IG existing now, you have, and sorry, I'm flipping through a little bit. You have already a, you have a stepped height requirement. So from the first 100, it's 30 feet. For every 100, you can go 15 feet higher. So you have to be well away from any residential area to actually reach the 90 feet. So on each of these portions, you can see on the Summit Drive, in order to reach 90, you have to be at the far end. On Blanchard Road, you have to be right up against the highway to be 90. But if you recall, and I know you're, so we said 155, we don't want to be building 155. It's not in the character of the existing development in Burlington. The setbacks, looking at IG, we just felt that in order to, when we're looking at the sites now, we don't have perfect squares of sites. We have sites that have a lot of physical features that we want to work around, we want to enhance, we want to make a little bit more of a campus-like development, so it's more walkable with a central core, and that's the reason for the flexibility in the side setbacks.
Thank you.
But all of these would still need to go to the planning board to still be reviewed for the site plan review to go through all of that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Warren, Precinct 4. I would just ask that when we get to voting on the specific properties, I would really like to hear from Precinct 7 town meeting members. Since all of these are in your precinct, I'd like to know how this affects you, your families, your neighborhoods, your home values, etc. That would really offer me a lot of guidance. Thank you.
Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Frank Monaco, Precinct 4. I'm not sure who to direct the question to, but what I am curious about is there are 3 major sites that are identified here, and we have the ownership, the proponent for each of those here. It feels a little bit like, I think what this is you're going to prepare, we're going to zone these sites, and you'll get them into a state where you could go ahead and market them. Is the idea to build a suit when you get the right client, or are you going to build out? It's a build a suit kind of operation. So, okay, so that makes sense. Now, 2 things I'd like to know. What do you think, what do you estimate the timeline is from when you can close on a client and a building is ready? And that could vary. And the second thing is, do you have to have such large sites to be able to bring this kind of industry in? Because there aren't, I can't think of too many more places where you get anything of this magnitude in the town unless we really redevelop something that's, you know, completely zoned differently, like a retail area. Could someone address those? Thank you.
Mr. Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To your question, Frank, the bottom line is what you want to do is you want to attract these companies in initially, and you want them to grow. So they have to have areas to grow. If you look at, as I indicated earlier, Shire is a project I did in Lexington. It started out as 2 buildings and grew into a campus environment. So the amount of investment that they will put into a life science building is substantial. So if the site doesn't accommodate their future growth needs, they won't consider it.
Thank you, sir.
You need the highway presence too. I don't want to say it's ego gratification, but they want that sign on the highway. So.
Mr. Miller. Was it Mr. Oh, Mr. Boyven, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Boyven, Precinct 1. My question is regarding structured parking in general. These sites, particularly I'm thinking of Summit Drive, there's a great deal of existing paved parking. would this type of development plan allow or prohibit a structured parking structure to be built to encompass some of that existing parking into a smaller footprint and allow some increased green space? Or does it have to be 2 floors underground? And I'm guessing that would only accommodate the new building that would be going up.
Ms. Kastner.
So the hope, actually, I think all of us, when reviewing, and you can ask the planning board, wish that we had structured parking opportunities when this site was built. If you look at the parking area on the bottom, toward the bottom of the slide, there's a giant retaining wall holding that parking lot up. If we could have done structured parking, we could have probably had a lot less surface parking there, and we could have preserved more of the green space. So the idea is very much to try to encourage, because we do have the flexibility of the alternatives, to be able to not just have building parking under the building, but a lot of these sites have different topography, and if you look at the Keurig site, it slopes down from one side to the other, and there's parking built in under the building. There's some opportunities in some of these sites to take advantage of that topography. So if you're building a 25 or 18-foot retaining wall, we'd rather have you build a smaller footprint and have more structured parking and have more green space. So that's the hope. But we can't do that if we don't have some of these different dimensional criteria put in place. Thank you.
Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. With respect to the Blanchard Road property, that's in a fairly low-lying area. So would you anticipate who's ever going to build there putting under building parking? Or would the building itself be, let's say, like a 3rd floor and the parking would be ground level up to like a 2nd floor?
Wait for microphone, please.
Good evening. Todd Fremont Smith for the record, Nordblom Company. We would anticipate building the parking under the building as structured parking, very similar to the Keurig building. So it wouldn't be underground. It's very difficult to do underground parking in that location just due to the groundwater.
And then, Mr. Moderator, with respect to a question from Ms. Warren about people who live in Precinct 7, if it's going to reduce traffic, I'm in favor of it. My only concern with Blanchard Road is it's a side road and a side street, and as you probably know, it floods after a heavy rain. The swamp gets overflows, and it does freeze. It causes sheets of ice on the road. It's also difficult to drive when there is heavy rain, so I hope you know that. So my only concern is if there's going to be more traffic there, it's just going to create more of a hassle for people around between 5 and 6 o'clock every night. South Bedford Street and Blanchard Road are gridlocked. So I just hope you can do something about that.
Mr. Moderator, just quickly, I don't want to get too into the kind of site specifics of development, but life science overall, as we've discussed, has less traffic than general office. 60 Blanchard Road already has a permitted 80,000 square foot office building with a lot of surface parking with no structured parking. If we could do this in IH, we can build a much better plan and redevelopment. And if we can attract life science to these sites versus general office, you're going to have less parking, less traffic. So, thank you.
Ms. Saltman, did I see your hand up? Okay. Yes, Mr. Webb.
So again, addressing Mrs. Warren's question. Sorry? Oh, Dave Webb, Precinct 7, sorry. So I'm a Precinct 7 member, and I have maybe a unique position. I'm also on the Land Use Committee, and you can tell by the vote that I ultimately voted for this, all 4 of these warrant articles. But I asked a lot of questions. I, too, am very concerned, being a Precinct 7, the famous area south of 128, we're getting way overbuilt. There's flooding problems, there's traffic problems, and so on and so forth. But I was convinced by these developers that, by this article, these articles, that there would be, when life science opportunities came up, the buildings that would be developed would be, not too high. We have the height restriction now. There would be less traffic, if anything, versus a regular office building. There might be more green space depending on how the underground parking goes. And so I see very few, if any, obviously negative aspects to these projects, and I think they would be a benefit to Burlington, and I'd encourage the body to vote for it, for all 4 articles.
Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Move the question.
I think we're a little early yet, Mr. Sinesi. This is a big article, but you moved it. All those in favor of moving the question? All those opposed? I think the motion fails. Let's talk a little bit longer. Any further questions? Maybe I did that prematurely. Seeing none. Let's take a vote on Article 2. All those in favor? It's a 2/3, so we're... All those opposed? It's clearly a 2/3 majority. The motion passes. Do I have to count this? Good. All right. Article 3 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee as printed in the warrant. Are there any specific questions or comments anyone wishes to make on this article? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Article 4 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee as printed in the warrant. Any questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Article 5. It's been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. The article is as printed in the warrant. Any questions on this article? Seeing none. Well, if I do see Mr. Sachs.
Hi, John Sachs, Precinct 7. I just wanted to say that to the developers, that stretch of Blanchard Road has the wetland on one side and whatever on the other side. It would be a really lovely thing because it's an unwalkable street. You can't walk it, it's dangerous. My personal vision is if you guys could build a boardwalk in the wetland with the cooperation of the Conservation Commission, then there would be a beautiful wetland walk where people could walk by and see the animals, the alligators, the crocodiles, or at least whatever's over there. And because it would connect to other walking areas. Given millions of dollars, it would be a relatively small thing, and it would be an absolutely fantastic benefit to this town if you could walk and or bike or whatever along Blanchard Road, because there's no way to do it other than to put a boardwalk. So just thought I'd throw that out there, and I'm voting yes.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Mr. Moderator, members of the body, thank you for your time and consideration. And this was momentous. I don't think I've ever gotten a unanimous vote in my life. Thank you.
Well, thank you, folks, for all your hard work and preparation in putting this together. It's appreciated by the body and by me. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Article 6, repurpose school capital warrant articles. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee and is as printed in the warrant. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob Pewter from the School Department. The request in front of you is to transfer funds from an underspent warrant article, which was the cafeteria tables. We spent $12,483 approximately less dollars than what we had ever requested. We'd like to take that money and take $11,576 and put that towards the Pine Glen sewer pump. The estimate that we had for $14,000, we actually got the quote to do the physical work with prevailing wage, came in about $4,000 over that. Also, once we actually took the system apart, we were presented with the opportunity to put a multi-stage controller system and then a 4-point alarm, whereas the prior one didn't have the controller and only had a high limit alarm. So basically, if the tank was flooding, that's when the alarm would go off. This new system is designed with 4 high and low alarms, so that way if one alarm is set, the pump will go off. The next alarm goes off, the second pump will go off. So I think this is funds that would actually benefit the public school system. Thank you.
Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 14-0-0 in favor.
Questions from the body? Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. First I want to commend you for coming in under budget on the tables. But I just have one ask as a member of the Capital Budget Committee. Article 719, what was the total on that from the previous allocation?
So 719, the total was 14,000.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is I was sort of unclear on the verbiage to the warrant until I watched the informational session that the clerk's office had put out a couple of days ago. It was put out last Wednesday. I thought that was very informative, and it's very helpful coming into this meeting tonight. I saw your segment on it. I just wish you had brought it to capital budget, because now when you take both of the spends and put them on top of each other, it becomes a capital warrant that should come in front of capital budget. Just in the future, if you could be mindful of that. I don't think the project sounds like a project that's unworthy, but I just ask you to just be mindful of that in the future.
Was there a vote of the school committee on this?
5-0.
5-0? Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Article 7. Has been withdrawn, I believe, but Ways and Means has a comment they would like to make on it.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We appreciate the initiative taken to propose this auction fund, but in discussions at Ways and Means, we thought that it wasn't quite ready to be brought forward. So we voted to sort of unanimously to postpone it to a later meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Article 8. It's been moved and seconded by Ways and Means Committee. The amend administrative and professional classification plan, and it is as printed in the warrant. Mr. Riggs, Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 4-0-0 to support changes to the job classifications for these two positions. 14-0-0, sorry.
Gentlemen, who's presenting?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Denizio, Town Accountant. Just to add to that, the selectmen voted 5-0-0 in favor also.
Thank you.
So it's my pleasure to speak to you tonight on Article 8. The purpose of this article, as the name suggests, is to request a change or an amendment to the Administrative and Professional Classification Plan. I know that there was a detailed memo in your backup, and I hope you had a chance to review that. But if I may, I'd like to try to summarize it for you tonight. So what we've been doing for the last year in two different ways is to take a look at the structure of our town's financial team. We've been looking at what type of functions are performed and which office is responsible for those. The second prong of this was that we brought in the Department of Revenue, their Division of Local Services, to come and perform an outside review of our financial structure in the town too. One of the aspects of the financial team operations that we identified as an area of possible improvement was with the purchasing functions. The purchasing functions had been housed or handled from the town administrator's office, but really these functions should be integrated with accounting and budgeting for reasons for budget control, for contracting, and for managing contracts. Last fall, we had our purchasing agent left for another job, and it left us with the perfect opportunity to implement some of these operational changes and improvements that were recommended to us and that we were recommending to you. We were able to do this without a change in budget or staffing levels. So I promised I wasn't going to use my hands, but I'm going to anyway, because there's a very simplified version of this, very simplified explanation. We currently have two positions. They're both at the same level in the A&P plan. We're looking to move one of those positions up 2 grades and one of those positions down 2 grades. Now, I know that's the simplistic view of it. Logistically, what happens is we would need to eliminate 2 positions that exist at grade 12, 2 analyst positions. We would then create a position at grade 14, a director position, and a lower level analyst position at grade 10. So in the end, there's no change in total workload, but what we're doing is trying to redistribute the responsibilities in a manner that is vital to improving the operations of the town and make sure we're doing it as efficiently and effectively as possible. The request, we feel, takes into account both the recommendations from the Department of Revenue's outside review and the town's financial team's review. And it does so in a cost-neutral manner. So I hope you had a chance to review the memo, and I appreciate the opportunity to summarize that for you today.
Questions on the article? Mr. Angelo, is that you up the back?
Pat Angelo, Precinct 5. Am I correct in when you said that we're not adding any new personnel by changing these slots?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. No new personnel added, same amount of FTE after the change.
Okay, but when one is moved up, it will be at an increase in salary?
Yes, and that will be offset by a decrease in salary in the position that's being moved down.
Okay, every time I see these positions changed or positions added, I break out in hives because all I can see is that the budget's going up in these various departments, and then also to the, to the OPEB. So I want to make sure, I would ask that Ways and Means please hold fast on the budget. This is kind of like an aside. Those of us on Social Security, we got a 1.6% increase in Social Security, which by the time Medicare went up and the insurances went up, I think I wound up with a net gain of 29 cents. So I would please ask Ways and Means to hold fast for the budget for May.
Additional questions from the body? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 9. Article 9, Burlington Transportation Study, has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. It is hereby requested that Article 9 be moved as follows: to see if the town will vote to instruct the moderator to appoint an ad hoc committee to study and report to town meeting the problems of transportation in the town of Burlington and compare with other communities' possible solutions. Ms. Nash.
Mildred Nash, Precinct 3. First of all, I apologize for the confusion of having the article wrong, but I learned a lot in the process, and I can thank a lot of people for helping me. The reason for bringing this up right now is threefold, or perhaps fourfold. First of all, I think we see in the newspaper, and if we drive around town at most hours of the day or an increasing number of hours, gridlock is the name of the game, and I have discovered you can walk most places faster than you can get there by car because the sidewalks, if we have them, aren't crowded. But there are two other things which have happened that makes this a good time to look at transportation. The first is the demise of the B line and the replacement, which is just coming in about Lyft. I think it's really good that we are doing something for the people who have stuck to the bitter end with the B line, but the B line was supposed to be public transportation, and this is an Uber Lyft kind of addition to the traffic. So I think right there we have something that is worth looking at. The second thing which gives us a motive and an opportunity to look at transportation is that we're in the first year of a 5-year school bus contract. And I bring that up for a couple of reasons. One is that last year at this time, we spent $6,000 for a consultant to get us the best possible bus contract that we could. And we ended up with a 5-year contract that cost $5 million and was thrown out because it wasn't done quite according to Hoyle. And it was at that point I said, when you want a good committee, you make it a town meeting committee. And I think if we look at the Water Study Committee, an excellent committee report just in time to save us from running out of water. Then there's the Sidewalk Committee, which I happen to have been on and was quite impressed with the people and their reaching out to the community to look for input, because basically we know better what we need than anybody else, and we come at a very good price, free. So the other thing is that we have other transportation possibilities here, one being the MBTA, which seems to be able to change what it does without talking to anybody, like changing the route so it wasn't going to Macy's over the Christmas season. But it seems like all of these things, if we could get a look at how they work, we might be able to come up with some suggestions. And as I was talking to the L'Express person to get some input from her, she said that she could hardly wait to see what happened with the Lyft program, because they have tried taxis as ways, I think, sort of the equivalent of the Lyft subsidy program we're talking about. But they still have the L'Express. They also have a peer review, and she sent it to me, and one of the things their peer review said was, see if you can't coordinate the various types of transportation. And I know that I have for years wondered and asked why the school bus contract and the B line couldn't have been coordinated for the times when school buses seem to be empty and the B line might be able to do the job. In Lexington, they've had those kinds of interactions, and it seems like the right time to be thinking about all of these things. So I figure if we've got this opportunity where there's a program that has gone down and a school bus program that is 4 years longer, this is a good time where we can get people to say, why don't we think creatively? Because like so many other things, Lyft, Uber, they're all creative things, and we keep doing just what we've always done. I think this is the time to see if there maybe could be better ways to make travel in Burlington as fast in a car as it is when I walk. So thank you.
Mr. Sagarino, did the selectmen take a position on this?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Selectmen voted 5-0 in favor.
Thank you. Questions from the body? Mr. Zavalotny.
Ernie Zavalotny, Precinct 5. I'm glad that somebody altered the language from this, because the $1,000 would buy approximately 3 days of somebody chit-chatting, maybe reviewing some of the previous studies. I also think it's a good idea that it's been reformulated and timed very nicely with what we previously heard as the availability of a $75,000 grant to look at least at one element of the studies. And that's a logical place to start looking at how to do a continual evaluation of how good transportation activities take place in town. Fully support the idea.
Additional comments? Yes, up at the back. Is that Mr. Stam?
Steve Stam, Precinct 4. Just very simple question to start is, one, what's the $1,000 going to do? That's going to be gone before you know it.
The language has been changed, Mr. Stam. That's not in the article anymore.
Okay. All right, one other thing. Just so the people are aware, the parking lot outside here is now all for handicap parking. It has to do with transportation, so which is why I bring it up. In other words, everybody who parks in that lot should have a handicap sticker. Thank you.
Additional comments from the body? Seeing none, put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. But now that you've given me more work to do, the moderator would appreciate some people stepping forward and will be willing to be on this committee. Mrs. Nash has already been informed she will be on it. Exactly. Okay. Article 10. It's been moved in. Article 10 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. A transfer from free cash to the Water Stabilization Fund. It is as printed in the warrant. Ways and Means. Mr. Riggs.
Ways and Means voted 13-0-0 to do this transfer as earlier established when the stabilization fund was set up.
Mr. Denizio.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This article may look familiar to you because you would have seen it last January, and it will look familiar going forward because it will be an annual article. This is linked to the town's long-term project for connecting to the MWRA, and as you may remember, there was a plan to increase water rates gradually, a phased-in approach over 10 years. This is the mechanism we have to use to try to capture those additional revenues. What happens is those water revenues are collected throughout the year. They close to free cash because they're general fund revenue. We transfer them from free cash into the stabilization fund to keep them until we need to use them.
Thank you. Questions from the body? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 11. To replenish the reserve fund, it has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash to the budget line item 92, Reserve Fund, the sum of $100,000, or to act in any other manner or relation thereto. Ways and Means, Mr. Riggs, please.
Hi, this is an annual update to the reserve fund. The fund is initially funded with $200,000 in last May's town meeting. After free cash has been certified, we transfer an additional $100,000 in there so that the reserve fund, can be used for sort of emergency projects that unanticipated needs. And the vote was 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Mr. Denizio?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Board of Selectmen voted 5-0-0, and we don't have anything to add.
Thank you. Questions from the body? Yes, sir, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Precinct 7, directed towards the Finance Committee. Could you please give us a report what the current balance of the reserve fund is and what things so far this year, since July 1st, you've transferred out of the reserve fund to pay for certain articles?
Yeah, that's easy. So far, we have not expended any money from the reserve fund in this fiscal year. The word replenish is maybe anticipating something that hasn't happened yet. So with this transfer, the balance will be $300,000.
So you're asking us to take money out of an account which may or may not be making a bunch of money for us. Do we invest the free cash? Where's the free cash sit?
Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. All the money is invested together, so there's no interest rate implication. This is a sort of a town tradition where we start off with $200,000 in the reserve fund and we supplement it with $100,000 at January town meeting once free cash is certified. We haven't had any needs for that this year, but I think just in the recent history, we had the emergency with the town common electrical, which we ran through the reserve fund, and a couple of items on Fire Station 2. So it does get used, and the important thing about the reserve fund for us is it allows us quick access to the funds without the necessity of having to call a town meeting.
Thank you. Follow-up question or comment. It would be appreciated at each town meeting that we have that the Finance Committee provide us with a list, an accounting of that reserve fund. Thank you.
I'll make a note.
Any additional questions? All right, let's put this to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 12, Burlington Historical Museum lift. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $120,000 for the purpose of funding handicapped accessibility improvements at the Burlington Historical Museum. Mr. Riggs, Ways and Means, recommendation?
Ways and Means voted 13-01 to make the museum handicapped accessible.
Thank you. Someone, selectman or someone speaking in favor? Mr. Sagarino? Oh, Mr. Sanchez. Oh, excuse me. Didn't mean to ignore you, Ernie. Capital budget, please.
Capital budget voted for this article 4-1. We have to point out that last May, this project was viewed as something that wouldn't even come to our attention because as it was planned at that time, we didn't think it would reach 15,000. So we approached this with a high degree of skepticism. Two comments. There have been some ideas that this is a lot of money to spend to have one individual requirements to be able to attend this particular facility. Actually, it's not that. The way the law is written, it's closed for all or open for all. So this is to allow future third graders, however many there are each year, to be able to go to this museum for a couple of days a year. The other comment I'll leave to Mr. Senesi, who's responsible for convincing us that it should be 4-1.
Thank you, Mr. Zabalotny. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Board of Selectmen voted 5-0. The purpose of this warrant article is, over the course of the past year, the Historical Commission approached us. They had been notified by the school department that one of their most well-attended events of the year, which is the school children attending the museum, the schools would not be able to attend due to the fact that the building was not handicap accessible. There was a student with a disability moving through the system, and they were going to cancel the entire program if we're unable to provide the access to the building. It's a town-owned building. We should provide this access. I know that we have Mr. Sanchez is here to answer any technical questions you may have on the project, and I know we have members of the Historical Commission here as well to answer any questions, but that's why we're bringing this article here before you. That's why it's here in January, and we didn't wait till May. We wanted to make sure that we're able to, if approved, put a system in place so that we would not interrupt, a very big, important event for the Historical Commission, and that is an annual event of having the school children come to the museum.
Questions from the body. Mr. Senesi.
Adam Senesi, Precinct 1. Ernie did kind of tease it. I wasn't going to say anything, but when we were at Capital Budget, I mentioned, a lot of people in this room know that I have a special needs child. The town of Burlington pays a lot to educate him, and I appreciate that. The town's been very supportive. And I saw this situation as parallel to my son's. Burlington fosters a spirit of inclusion and allowing all members of the community access to this facility. It speaks to what our community is all about, and I think it's important that we approve this for that reason, where this is something that's for the community good. It's not just for one person.
Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Precinct 3. I support this article. I would like to request, as a town that supports inclusion for all, that we have a plan going forward for the rest of our town buildings. I'm assuming that more of them are not accessible to all, and I would like a plan going forward for the rest of the buildings for this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. As someone who does have a disability, if you might call it that, I'm very sympathetic to the cause. I do have a couple of questions, though, with the improvement on that. I was always told that with a certain percentage of renovations or otherwise in dealing with some of the building renovations, that it does trigger another mechanism with handicap accessibility. And I'm curious if anyone could tell me what would have to be done if we do kind of reach that benchmark.
Building inspector.
The question, I'm sorry, Andrew Ungerson, your building inspector for the town. The question that you said is the cost of this job or proposed job, would it trigger in any other requirements to bring the building up to full handicap code compliance? Within the state handicap code, it stipulates that if we spend up to or more than a third, if I'm not mistaken, of the total cost assessed value of the building, then the entire building, including restrooms, would have to be brought up to handicap specs.
Follow-up, if I may, Mr. Moderator?
Go ahead.
We're going to go through, and I'm not, again, necessarily adverse to this, because I think it really is important to, to make it accessible. Will it trigger other necessities, like a bathroom, accessibility and whatnot. I mean, we're going down this road. I just want to make sure that, you know, everything is included, so, excuse me, we make an informed decision as to the cost and what other ramifications of that will be.
I have discussed and sat down with Mr. Sanchez and with representatives of the Historical Commission. We have tried to look at other alternatives as to better financial or relocation of this ramp. At this time, the location which is proposed, I think would be the best for the building and accessibility to the building. When this goes out to bid, I believe we'll have to look further into or sitting down with the cost of that job and the assessed value of the building as to whether or not that triggers in any other handicap requirements.
Has any, I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, has that been discussed? I mean, again, we've kind of gone down that road. I'm assuming that there is a restroom in the building, and if we're going to go to the length of putting a handicap accessible lift, and this particular individual needs to use a restroom, it seems to me rather foolish that we're going to allow them access to a building but not to a restroom. So if that's the case, I'd just kind of like some clarification here. It just seems to me that something was overlooked.
Peter Capola, Historical Commission. The museum has two basements, both of which are have railings and were built to code 20 years ago. So anybody will have access to those restrooms. But at some point, we are going to have to do some renovations to them. They haven't been maintained for a long time. But they're working basements. They do have railings and handicap seats and things like that.
Thank you.
Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Matt Frost, Precinct 3. It seems like this is an awful lot of money, especially for the number of people that would be using it. I have a handicapped child also. I think there are other alternatives that would be a lot less expensive. There are vendors, U.S. Medical Supplies, AmeriGlide. They manufacture platform lifts that are capable of lifting wheelchairs for under $5,000 installed. Have you investigated those options?
Mr. Sanchez.
Mr. Moderator, yes, we have. We actually investigated many options, including constructing ramps to get to the front door and all the...
I'm not talking about a ramp. I'm talking about a wheelchair lift.
Yes.
A mechanical lift that would lift a wheelchair for under $5,000.
Okay. If I may?
Yeah. Mr. Sanchez, please.
So the answer is yes. We have looked at outdoor lift, which I believe that's the one you're talking about, totally exposed to the elements. And I did not get a $5,000 quote from the vendors that we looked at. Is a little more than that. Plus, we have to modify the building for it to work as well. So it's probably talking between $40,000 plus, maybe even close to $50,000 to do the modifications, plus install the lift. The issue with the outdoor lift is that unlike one that you have at home that you're probably using every day, I think you heard from the sense here that this type of lift that we're going to install here is not going to be used every day, unfortunately. What we're afraid of is we install something like that, and by the time we get to use it, because it's been sitting outside, it's not going to work. So the idea is to have something a little more expensive, unfortunately, but it will be something similar to what we had at the Grandview, which is indoors, so it'll work by the time we actually need to use it.
Okay, I did a little Googling. These vendors have websites. They have the prices there. You can call them. And installed $5,000. Boy, that's a lot better than $120,000 for the same thing, it seems to me. And another question, I don't think the research has been done thoroughly on this. And I will be voting no on it because I don't think the research has been done carefully on this. And another thing, somebody mentioned the restrooms are in the basement. What are the facilities for getting handicapped people down to the restrooms again? into the basement?
So if I may, because Andy, and this is unfortunate because I talked to John Luther a couple of weeks ago about this. The lift will bring people to the main floor, and you don't have to have bathrooms that are open to the public. So as long as we don't have access to the basement to anybody, remember it was either all or none, so if they are not open to the public, so we don't have to do anything to them at this point. However, we're thinking that as we do the lift project, we'll try to design it in a way that we can access the basement such that in the future, as a separate project, if we need to update the bathrooms, then we can provide access to them as well.
Okay, I'm all in favor of handicapped accessibility, but it can be done a lot less expensively. Thank you.
Additional questions? Yes, up at the back. Is that Jean? Mr. Rossi?
Gene Rossi, Precinct 2. I believe there's a ramp already on the side of that building. No. There is not? Okay. Second of all, on certain historical buildings, can you get an exemption for handicapped accessibility? Because I don't think there's an elevator yet in the Bunker Hill Monument, is there? Or the USS Constitution, Paul Revere House. I don't think there's any elevators in those houses. Second of all, what do we do about handicap parking? If a van wants to park there with a wheelchair chair lift, where's the parking lot going to be?
There's no question.
No question.
You got to have parking for handicap.
Oh, handicap parking. So the idea is to place a handicap parking spot in the back of the building when there is an existing driveway, and that's how the handicap accessibility will happen through the rear of the building. And that's what we're planning to put the lift, so it'll be a good way to allow for people to come in, park, and then use the facility.
Thank you.
Mr. Killelea.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Killelea, Precinct 6. I'd like to concur with what Ms. Ellis said about getting a report on the condition of our handicapped access to our buildings and our liability exposure to that. And I was wondering if we could probably have some sort of a presentation in the June town meeting. Would that be possible?
It would be possible. Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Frank Monaco, Precinct 4. This is to Peter. We're sort of focused on the school department because of a specific situation, but handicap access is handicap access. Aren't there other times that the museum is open, summer, other times that people would come, and it's very possible that, you know, seniors or whatever would make use of this. I just can't imagine this being for one, you know, a one-time purpose. I don't think that's the case at all. So that's a point I'd like to make. And secondly, when it almost doesn't matter. This is a one-time expense. It's a unique building. It seems like a shame to not make it easy enough for anybody and everybody to get into it, and I would support it. And I trust the Public Works Department to look into doing it well but efficiently. And we've also asked them to look to see if they could get any money from the Disability Access Commission to help offset some of this. If we can, we will. If we can't, we won't. So I would support it. And Peter, could you answer that? Thank you.
Yes, we've had a number of people who showed up who had trouble getting up the front stairs, and fortunately they had their children with them who pushed them from behind and helped up the stairs. None of us were going to do that. As you know, that would be a violation and open for lawsuits, but we've had a number of people who needed help, assistance in getting up the front stairs into the building and then getting out again.
Mr. Zabolotny.
In this discussion, we shouldn't lose sight of the initial problem of the front stairs, which have to be repaired, and I would hope that for this amount that we could somehow spend a half day to fix the front stairs as well.
Mr. Wells-Bean.
Andy Wells-Bean, Precinct 3. I would encourage you to use the principles of universal design when you're looking at this project, so that you're not just thinking about it for wheelchair users, but also for families with strollers or elderly folks with walkers and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering whether the lift that you've been looking at would require the someone who is trained to operate it, or whether it would be easy enough to operate and intuitive enough to operate so that somebody walking up or rolling up, as the case may be, would be able to use it without assistance from whoever's manning the museum that day.
Mr. Sagarino.
Yes, Ms. Sanchez says it will be user-friendly.
Any additional questions from the body? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Article 13. Alteration of public way, Mooney Road. Has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and the article is as printed in the warrant. Okay, who's speaking on this one? Kristen, you get the chore? Ms. Gassner.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. At the last town meeting, 2 town meetings ago, if you recall, the planning board approved a lot at 0 Mooney Road, but what came to light was we had a lot of problems with our parcel map, what was recorded at the registry, what we approved in the 50s. So what we did was clean up a lot of the issues that had happened there and convey property to property owners, and where some of the roadway was in the property. But we actually didn't say at the end of that warrant article, and to discontinue the public way. So that's why we're here today in housekeeping to add that last sentence. So thank you.
Thank you. Any committee have a recommendation? Zoning bylaw review or anybody? Land use? Any questions from the body? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Oh, I have to just, it's a general bylaw.
No, it isn't. No, it's a general article, but it involves property.
Excuse me. I needed to make sure there was a 2/3. All those in favor? Opposed? It's clearly a 2/3. Now I'm good. Thank you. Article 14 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and the article is as printed in the warrant, authorizing confirmation or release of deed. Mr. Sagarino, are you speaking on this?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll introduce it, and then we may have to turn it over to Town Council for this one.
Okay.
Board of Selectmen voted 5-0. Okay, I can assure you, you've never had this one come before town meeting. But several months ago, we received a call from a local realtor, and a house was about to be sold. They did the title search about 3 days before the sale, I think, which is customary, and they were stunned to find out that despite the fact they had paid taxes on the property for over 30 years, that the town owned the property. So my first question was, is it big enough to put a police station on there? Because we weren't considering that. But in all honesty, we looked back into it, and during the conveyance of some of the parcels related to the Marion Road conservation land, there was some mix-ups on the paperwork and what was recorded at the Registry of Deeds. It is kind of a funny situation, but there were 2 Burlington families affected by this. The sellers and the other family that was buyers were also from town. So there was definitely impact on these 2 families, and we would urge your support. Town council can fill in any technical questions you may have on this, but that's my non-technical summary of what happened.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Certainly in principle, this is something that, sounds like a good idea. The only issue I had with it is in trying to research this, it's only referencing deeds, which aren't particularly accessible online. So I was trying to relate this to our lot numbers that we do have access to, and of course that's not referenced here. So the problem I have with this is I'm not really clear which lot we're trying to convey. So I'd like to make sure before we support this that we understand how much property we're talking about and which lot we're talking about. Because, there seem to be 2 lots that could be referred to. 27-118-1 is 100 Bedford Street, and 21-235-0 is a big plot of land behind Pine Haven. So, what lot are we actually voting on? Because I think it would be ridiculous for us to vote on something where we don't know what the lot is.
We're going to refer this to town council.
So what we're not conveying is map 21 parcel 235, which is the 15.7 acres, which is the conservation land and the town will retain. That was the land that the town meeting voted, town council opined on, town council's expert opined on, that the town was to get. The purchase and sale agreement included that. What wasn't included is this parcel 1 that's listed in the deed that's referred to as here. So there's 2 descriptions in the deed, a description for parcel 1, which is actually a 9-lot subdivision. So it's not only the lot that this came to light for, but there are 8 other lots in the subdivision that technically list the town back in the title as having ownership of because of this deed being miswritten. The other parcel that's listed on the deed into the town is parcel 2, which is map 21, lot 235, the 15.7 acres. We're not doing anything with that. That's staying with the town.
So I'm hearing that we're conveying 1 lot, but we may have the same issue with 7 other lots also?
The parcel is described as a parcel and actually is a parcel that has since been divided or was divided at the time into 9 lots. So the parcel is 1 description, it's 5 acres, but it affects 9 subdivision lots. And so we won't be actually probably conveying it. The title insurance company is going to request a release deed so that the town releases any rights that they may have in those lots. Because they were you didn't ever vote to take it, you didn't pay for it. It was clearly a very large Scrivener's error.
So I can certainly sympathize that, but I'm still a little concerned about the fact that, do we have a map that we can show what it is that we're conveying here?
Yes, it's actually referenced as parcel 1 is described by meets and bounds in the deed into the town.
No, can we see a map is what I'm asking for.
So we don't, part of the problem is there are 2 issues. Certainly in the title there is a map that includes the subdivision off of Marion Road, and the town council's expert in 2002 recommended that the town get a survey of the 15.7 acres, and they never did. So the 15.7 acres the town has, we're not touching, but there is a plan referred to in the deed of parcel 1, which is what will be released.
I guess I still have the same problem here. We keep referring to a deed. This is the only warrant article regarding land I've ever seen where a map of what we're talking about has never been presented. And it's referencing a deed that we don't have access to. So personally, I would suggest we vote against this until someone can actually show us the land that we're voting on so that we don't make another mistake.
So I can assure you that a lot of attorneys have gone over this with a fine-tooth comb. So the subdivision that you're releasing is actually off of McCarthy Drive, off of Bedford Street. And it includes 10 lots, and it includes 5 acres. And it's referred to as Plan 296 of 1985. And that's the parcel 1 that's described in the deed. I mean, what I can do is I can take it down and show. Would you like me to bring it down to you?
Or I can go onto the online map. Isn't it part of the online map?
Have we been satisfied?
Okay, based on the map I just saw there, it looks like it's the lots that we would expect, 27.18.1, and then the related ones next to it. It's a deed map as opposed to referring to our lots, so it's not exactly one-to-one. But it seems fairly clear it at least is definitely not the big plot of land that we wouldn't want to be losing there, so that's very encouraging, and it looks like it's plots that are, this is really saying you shouldn't pay much money for your title search because apparently these other houses were sold with this same problem. But it appears to be okay.
Further questions, Mrs. Byer?
Kathy Byer, Precinct 2. I have a question, and that is the word release versus the term convey. Could you explain the difference there? Thank you.
So the town never voted and authorized to receive the conveyance or purchase this property or receive it as a gift. And so it never had the right to hold it. And so we're not going to convey it back. We're going to release any rights the town had to release the mistake that occurred.
Mr. Webb?
So my question is, there's 2 lots that were conveyed to the town, one by mistake. Were property taxes paid to the town on that lot that we're now dealing with? And if so, what happens to that money?
So there were, not to be technical, but there were 2 parcels that were conveyed to the town. The parcel that was improperly conveyed to the town is now made up of 10 lots in a subdivision. Those lots have been paying taxes to the town.
Okay, but if this is an heir, the town does not own it, what happens to that money?
The town keeps the taxes.
Town keeps that money, okay.
Right.
And could there be a lawsuit or something that would come from that?
No, that's why
decision?
we're cleaning this up.
Okay.
PDQ.
I just hope this really cleans it up and there's no future problems.
Mr. Pearson?
according to this letter, Monty Pearson, Precinct 3, according to this letter from Daymore Law, Parcel 1 and Parcel 2 is 41 acres of land that was given to the town for conservation. Is that 41 acres of land not involved in this? It's not conveyance. I forgot what the other word is.
15.7 acres is what, so that's Daymore Law's claim to the town. That's their request. So when we broke it down and went back to all the title documents and went back to the town meeting authorizations and the actual deeds, the 15.7 acres is the conservation land that was supposed to be deeded to the town. That's referred to as Parcel 2 on the deed. And Parcel 1 on the deed includes 5 acres, more or less. That document that you're referring to includes some other conservation land that was not part of this deed.
Okay, and how is the land, the pre-subdivision land with the 10 lots on it, how is it being used? Is it just open space now?
No, it's got 10 houses on it.
Oh, it has 10 houses on it?
Yes.
So we're not likely to, never mind.
No, and they're paying taxes to the town.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Seeing nothing further? All those in favor? Opposed? It's a clear 2/3. Motion passes. Article 15, amending Article 4, Section 1.10, filling of vacancies other than selectmen. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and the full article is as presented in the warrant. Who do we have talking on this one? Bylaw review? Mr. Miller?
Hi, Dave Miller, Precinct 4, Vice Chair of the Bylaw Review Committee. Back in April of last year, the town, in the townwide election, we voted to change the treasurer tax collector position from elected to appointed. So this is just going into some sections in the general bylaw, housekeeping, just to reflect that change. And while we're in there, we also found there were some areas that had gender-specific references, like he, and we made those gender neutral. So there's no functional change. It's just made to make the bylaw reflect the way the town actually is. And we voted 3-0-1 for this, and the one abstention was because we had a new member. It was her first meeting and hadn't been involved with all the edits that have been going on, so she couldn't vote on it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Questions on this article? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Did we get a resolution? Yeah, I'm surprised you folks are a little slow here. I hear a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor? Oh, well, wait a minute, wait a minute. Hold on. We might have another piece of business. Yes, Ms. Neufeld.
Phyllis Neufeld, Precinct 5. I would like to see town meeting pass a resolution. It reads, be it resolved, town meeting wishes to put on record our opposition to the 14-foot sign that the selectmen approved for the shops at Simon's Park on town-owned land.
Do you have that in writing for me?
I do.
Could you give it to me?
I could, and there's also 41 people that informally signed it.
Okay. Okay, we have a resolution on the floor. Well, if we adjourned, we'd have to come back on Wednesday just for the resolution. You don't want to do that, do you, Woody? All right, so we have a resolution on the floor. Is there any discussion on it? Be it resolved, town meeting wishes to put on record our opposition to the 14-foot sign that the selectmen approved for the shops at Simons Park on town-owned land. Questions, comments from the body? You certainly may. Ms. LaRue.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barbara LaRue, Planning Board Chair. I just wanted to inform the body that the Planning Board is in opposition to this sign that we sent a letter to the Board of Selectmen in August expressing our concerns and asking them not to approve the sign. So I thought that you would all want to know that. Thank you.
Ms. Warren.
Chris Warren, Precinct 4. I guess I'm sort of just want somebody to give me the summary what happened here. And is it against the zoning of the town center, or I just need a little education.
Is there anyone who wants to provide edification? Mr. Priest? Step into the, don't put your head in the noose.
I managed to always stick around for the fun part. So according to our bylaws, the selectmen have right to decide what signage is placed on public land. And so the legal team for this developer chose to exact that and came before us in lieu of going to planning or ZBA. So in a nutshell, that's what happened. And then there's a 3-2 vote that occurred at the Board of Selectmen meeting that night. Sherry, I don't know if there's anything you want to elaborate on from a ZPRC standpoint.
Ms. Ellis.
Thank you. Not from the ZBRC standpoint, but just a little clarification that this actual sign is on a right-of-way on town-owned land. And the right-of-way is unzoned according to a legal definition. Therefore, it does not have to go by the zoning bylaws. And there is signage bylaws in both the general and the zoning bylaws of Burlington. And in the general bylaws, it is stated that the Board of Selectmen have the right to allow signage on the municipal property on this unzoned land. So I do know that the Zoning Board of Appeals also wrote a letter to the Board of Selectmen stating some of their concerns with this sign. And they did discuss it. The Board of Selectmen discussed that at their latest meeting, and again, their approval 3-2. So I just wanted to add that little bit. Thank you.
Ms. Beyer.
Kathy Beyer, Precinct 2. I want to say that when I first heard about this and how it went to the Board of Selectmen, I was outraged because it did not go through process that I understand things need to go through process and through this body. However, I went first to the bylaws and saw it falls under the responsibility in the right-of-way to come up with signs that help us navigate when we're driving around town, and that goes to the Board of Selectmen. And so it appeared to me that this was a legal path that could be taken, and I was still really irritated that it went around the process of working through the committees that we have in place. I also want to say, though, there are many people who have worked hard on a master plan for our town center, and they have looked at getting the newer buildings and developments like the Simon's shops at Simon's set so that we don't have acres of blacktop and then a strip center. And so what's happened here is this parking lot is back behind the main building. And I think that for some of us driving through town, a well-designed directory may be advisable. I think that it is beneficial to people who are driving, trying to navigate, trying to find the shops, not just relying on GPS. So I'm sort of back to being in the middle of this, and what I would like to see is for the developer to work with some of the town committees and go through process. I do not see a way to be able to use the current bylaws as it is to go for this sign other than what came about. People may have differing opinions. I'm happy to hear them, but I do think this is the first of a number of similar problems that are going to come before us, looking at buildings being up closer and having the parking lots be behind. So I want to point that piece out. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. DiTucci.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. Just a question first through you for Mr. Priest. Did the developer buy the piece of property from the town?
To my knowledge, no, they did not. They
Okay.
bought it from the prior owners.
Okay, because that would need approval from town meeting. Okay. Number two, on the town having the right to put signage on municipal property is accurate, but only to address municipal property, not to address private property. So I think that's where the confusion is. Again, if it was a school building or a town hall building or a fire station, on municipal property, you're allowed to put up that sign to identify only municipal property, not to identify property that a developer owns. So was this property conveyed to the developer, or was it just granted?
No, it wasn't conveyed to the developer. There's a license agreement that is in place that spans a time of 20 years for the town to accumulate a total of $436,000 over that time.
Okay, right. So there's they're renting the property.
Basically, yes.
Okay, so again, just something through probably only legal counsel can answer. Is it true that only municipal property can have signs to identify municipal property and not to identify private property?
No.
So that's what I need to know.
The answer is no.
So any property in town that is owned by the town, that I know the selectmen have jurisdiction over the property, they can put up a sign for developed property or for a shopping center or something.
No.
So that means you could do it on. That means you can do it on the common.
But let's get something, I think, straight here. This was done legally. It's, so far as we know, it's been gone through council, and it's been approved through council. So the question is not whether it's legal. The question is whether you approve of the process that it went through.
Okay. So my understanding is that the licensing was legal.
Yes.
There was an RFP process. There was a whole bid process.
Yes, there was an RFP process, there was a bid process for it. It followed the law that way. Now, the question is not whether it was done legally.
Okay.
It's not for us to handle, I'm afraid, Mr. DiTucci. Last time I
Well, that's
checked,
why
I
I'm
wasn't
asking
a
legal
lawyer.
counsel. If the selectmen can do this, and can it happen on other pieces of property? That's all. I just want to make sure of that.
So it would depend on the property. So it's not, it doesn't happen on every piece of property. It depends on the property, depends on where it is, depends on how it's classified. In this particular instance, the Board of Selectmen did an RFP process. They entered into a license in accordance with the RFP process, and they're getting paid compensation for it.
Okay, I'm still not sure I can support this. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I support the resolution.
Ms. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sally Willard, Precinct 4. I support this because I think that the very notion that the Board of Selectmen has approved a license, a lease for signage on town property, having done it once, it sets a precedent, and they could do it again. And I think that that's something that we need to express our dissatisfaction and disfavor with. Thank you.
Ms. Rollins.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sonia Rollins, Precinct 6. By way of information for members of the body who were not here many years ago, I chaired the 3A subcommittee, which worked on the town center overlay. The selectmen were within their right to lease, to license the property, but it is my stance, and I think many other members, that just because you're within your right to do something doesn't make it right. So the philosophy that the 3A subcommittee, or I should speak for myself personally, we went to the selectmen and voiced our concern for two reasons. First of all, the town center vision is something that works over 15, 20 years' time. It's still building out, and what we knew for sure was a directory sign of 14 feet on Cambridge Street was not something that was in the vision. That vision is faltered, in my opinion, when you take a directory sign the size of that, which is something that you would normally expect to see on a Middlesex Turnpike type. The second portion is something that I think one of the previous speakers spoke about, which is when you talk about process, the critical component for process here is that there is a process in place for this. So while it may be very much so legal to do, and the selectmen have taken their vote, my feeling is that I'm quite upset at the comment that you can license the land. I would have still liked to see the ZBA comment on it and it go before the ZBA. There's a process in place, there's a reason for that. As a member of the business community, I can tell you that there are certainly many businesses who would love the opportunity to find a triangle of land that the town could license for them. I can name 3 or 4 right off the top of my head that were denied that right by the ZBA, and rightfully so, because it wasn't within the zoning bylaw. So the message, I think, just so that we're clarifying everything for everybody here, is not so much that we can reverse the selectmen's vote right now because the vote was taken. The message is that the body would like to relay to the Board of Selectmen that whether it's within your right or not, please follow the process, as I think we've opened Pandora's box. Is it something that is done, that could be done every week? Not necessarily. Do I believe there are other right-of-ways where there could be business owners who could capitalize it? I do, and I have to be honest with you. If I were them, I'd be looking at an application right now. So I think it's quite important for the body to just support the concept, if we could, that it is not our intent to have the executive body of this town doing signage. I respect their opinion. I respectfully disagree with their opinion, but I do respect that they were within their right. What I'm not necessarily thrilled about is the 3A corridor has been 13 years of work, and I don't believe a directory sign was meant to be there. I would ask you to support the body's resolution. Thank you.
Does anybody wish to speak against the resolution? Any problem with putting it to a vote then? Mr. Parsons?
Thank you. First I want to thank Mr. Priest for
standing and hearing this and answering to it. As to the wording of the resolution that we're opposed to the sign, I haven't decided that I'm opposed to the sign. I think it's a pretty good use of the space. I just, and I don't think that it's necessarily a violation of process. I don't think there is a process here. I think that this spot of unzoned land is within the purview of the selectmen. On the other hand, I would hope to send the message that a lot of people have worked on a master plan and on the town center plan, and I think that there are some broad principles that we should take a look at, and we should be more consultative and try to bring more people in to the decision. Meanwhile, the ZBRC has had on its back burner for a while considering the various signage laws and trying to harmonize them and propose something that is more directive so that we don't have these vagaries and opportunities for loopholes. We'll be working hard on that, and I support sending the message that we would like to be more consultative and try to come up with a uniform solution for signage.
Who's that up at the back? Is that Pat Mastangelo?
Pat Angelo, Precinct 5. While we have legal counsel here, is it possible for us to draw up like a bylaw preventing this from happening again?
Talk to the Bylaw Review Committee.
I'm asking legal counsel.
My favorite answer.
We're getting free legal advice, Sherry.
All right, so you ready for this? It depends.
On what?
Well, it depends on what bylaw you're going to do, whether you're going to do zoning bylaw, whether you're going to do general bylaw. It depends on whether it's land under the control of the selectmen, whether it's a public way. There's a lot of different things that would matter in it. So I would have to review anything that you proposed.
But is it possible to do a bylaw like this on land controlled by the selectmen?
So you can choose to zone. You can choose to zone things in particular ways and allow different uses on that particular zoned land. The problem is the classification of this land being a public way. So your zoning laws don't typically go into the middle of streets.
Okay.
So it really isn't that easy to answer. I'm not being flip. It really does depend on the situation.
Okay, and a question to Charlie through you, Mr. Moderator. Who are the three heroes who did this to us?
I don't have that information, sorry, Pat.
But I'm asking Charlie. I assume he was there. Dick, sorry.
You have to look at the
I assumed I was
selectmen's
Charlie.
minutes.
So the vote was 3-2. It's a public record. I can say that myself and Selectman Hogan voted against.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on this resolution? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion passes. I heard a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? Opposed? See you in May.